Hi, I'm Dr. Gemma, and welcome back to Cognitive, the Knitting Psychology podcast. Cheerfully and somewhat irregularly in business since 2008. Segments today may include what's on my hooks, needles, and spindles, a strategy, something I really like, put a lid on it, oh shoot, and blather. So sit back, put your feet up, pick up your knitting, crocheting, spinning, weaving, or dyeing, or any other yarny thing you're doing, and get ready to enjoy. We interrupt this podcast for the following special announcement. Gigi Knitmore, I know you're listening. I know it, and I am looking forward to once again hearing your dulcet tones over the podcast airwaves. Everybody here knows that you're working on it, and we're all looking forward to your glorious return. And I'm just so delighted and grateful that you're listening to my voice. And in the meantime, Jasmine, we love you, and we really appreciate all that you're doing. We now return you to your regularly scheduled episode. Hello, it's Dr. Gemma, and welcome to episode 196 of the Cognitive Podcast. And before I start, I want to reassure you that no Dr. Gemmas were harmed in the making of this episode, because I did have two exciting events this week, and I was recording this yesterday and realized that it just sounded horrendous. So you should realize that no, this has been a very strange week in which I took a lot of unusual risks and had some unusual experiences. But you should realize at no time was I really afraid, and at no time was I harmed, because I just think otherwise I'm looking back at my notes, and I was listening to the original of this episode and just went, good heavens, they're going to think I'm some kind of suicidal maniac or something. No, I'm not. So please, no fears. It was just a really interesting week, and I'm very pleased because I got myself out there and did some interesting stuff. But no, believe me, I wasn't out there skydiving or bungee jumping. Now, if you're into skydiving and bungee jumping, please don't be offended that I just class that in with risk-taking. But for me, it would be. I have to tell you right now, if I did either of those things, there would be no Dr. Gemma at the end. But no, I wasn't doing anything that is a little more frightening or high risk. So please, everybody, take a deep breath before I start talking about my week. But it has been a lively one, I have to put it that way. First off, your comments are very welcome, and you can leave them at the blog at cognitivepodcast.blogspot.com, or you can leave them on our group on Ravelry. I must say it's been mighty quiet in the comments side, but okie dokie. Also, let's get into the warm thanks. I want to thank Ariane for her pattern. That Ariane took the basic patterns I was offering and that originally were supplied to us by Carmen, and she cleaned them up and kind of merged everything and made a pattern that I think is really super for the crossbody bag. And it is free to everybody attending CFR 10, CFRX, as our Jasmine likes to call it. And so no problems there. She's got two versions of the strap in Tunisian, a narrow and a wider version. She just really did a great job. It's very masterful. Ariane designs anyway, and so this is the kind of thing every podcaster with a gathering dreams of, where you get an experienced designer in there, and they just sort of clean up a pattern and really pull it together in a nice way. And so I'm glad that she's done that. I think she's done the whole crochet community a service by doing it, to be honest. It's the pattern that needed to happen after all these little sort of scattershot patterns, free and not free, doing this bag. I think this is masterful. Also, I've been pronouncing her name wrong, but you know, I have discovered in this second series, I guess it's a product of my aging, me pronouncing things wrong or getting them wrong. Yeah, it does happen, I have to say. Maybe I don't edit as carefully as I used to. I don't know. But thank you for being along for the ride, despite moments like that. Meanwhile, I also want to thank the people signing up for CFR 10. We're at 31. I'm waiting for 2 payments from people I know are coming, but otherwise, and the good news is I believe we're going to lure our Lex into coming, another designer of crochet merit, I must say. So I think this is looking pretty wonderful. We still have all the classes as far as we know, and don't forget that our own Oink, among our vendors, Oink is bringing the Tunisian hooks, I believe. So that's exciting. There are 2 links in the show notes, in fact, to CFR. One is at the top under the warm thanks. It says Cognitive Fiber Retreat 10. All info is right here, and that link will take you to the information thread on Ravelry. Everything you need, as far as I can think of, is in the first post on that thread. Remember, if you're coming, it's $30 per adult attendee. That is someone over 18. Kids are free because we want to basically train the younger generation. You PayPal that to me at Gemma DW as in dog walk, at yahoo.com. Right now, this is not refundable. Right now, we have crossed the line where we're paying for the conference room, which makes me happy. And it's just open sign up at this point. Also, my apologies. Who did I do this to? Boranuna, our own Cynthia. I let her wait like 3 days before I updated the log online. But yes, I did get your payment. I'm sorry that I was probably making you rather nervous. And I have said the group projects before. These are basically if you're looking for a souvenir. If you want to bring your own knitting or crocheting, absolutely. But usually we say we're aware that people want to make something as their souvenir. So, the group projects, as I have said many times, we have the crossbody bags that we have a combination. We have Pachki doing the Tunisian and Ariane doing the bag. So that can be a project. We've got Woobles. I'll help you with that. If you want to get started, I can guide you to the free patterns and whatnot. And we've got, from last year, the sock yarn cow that was really popular. Again, for these, you need a series of hooks. I think Ariane's using a G and H hook for her bag. And if you're going to do Tunisian, Oink's got the hooks. And if she's selling them in sets, that'll even relieve that problem. But I just used, when I made my bag, I used an I hook. I went for a slightly larger hook because I have very high tension. And I used an I hook for Tunisian. In fact, I just used a normal crochet hook, to be honest. But I think it's easier with a dedicated Tunisian hook. And again, for woobling, that's a G hook. And for the Abbas sock yarn cow, I used a D as in dog hook. What I really just said in millimeters, well, you can see the conversion chart right there in the notes. And I'll let you do that. Meanwhile, what's on my hooks and needles, you may be wondering. I haven't finished anything, but I did start a new pair of socks because I'm just getting into that autumn mood where I like to knit more than I want to crochet. I'm not particularly woobling right now, but I am following along with Woobles groups on Reddit and having fun there. The Woobles do have a new advent calendar coming out. I'm not going to buy it. I'm actually going to consider doing their last year's advent calendar because, hello Minerva jumping into my lap, because the patterns are out there and available. I now have Minerva in my lap and she's talking a lot. I don't know if you can hear this. She's a bit jealous because my beloved hubs just came in. At any rate, of course I'm making a scrappy sock. These are called the still board socks, as in the last socks were the board silly socks. And I've got this big bag sitting at my feet of yarn scraps. So rather than be industrious and wind one of the many beautiful skeins of sock yarn I have, I'm just doing the socks out of scraps because I just love me stripy socks. And the stripes make me go faster in my fantasy land. And so I like to do them. I don't mind weaving the ends in, let's be honest here. No action on anything else. I am waiting for next week to return, I hope, to Vestuary 24 in the Lakeside Cardigan. And it's true, I'm looking at the sweaters I want to knit this winter. By the time I see you all at CFR 10, I probably will be knitting on a Fair Isle. No action in the spinning because my allergies have been really kicked up this year, and so little bits of fine fluff floating through the air are probably not the best idea for me right now. So let's get on to a strategy. Minerva is now shedding on my screen, and I am blowing off whiffs of little fine black cat hairs. She is lying in my lap, kneading me and purring and begging me for petting. So this is an interesting thing I'm doing right now, multitasking, trying to do these podcasts while trying to humor the resident feline. Okay, let's get on to a strategy. The strategy this week is to keep creating and keep trying new things. And those things are the same to me, to be honest. I think trying any new thing, even if it's something more physical like trying to run or to walk or to jog, I think these are all creative ventures. And what I mean by that is creativity sparks areas of your brain. It makes you do research. It makes you think constructively. It makes you lay out schedules and plan things. Even if it's something as simple as, I'm going to go to the gym once a week, I think you have to start doing homework to figure out how you will do it. And that's no different than if I say, well, I'm a knitter and I'm going to teach myself to crochet. I think that these are all creative ventures in their own ways. Now, having said that, yes, speaking as a psychologist, there are areas of the brain that are lighted up by creative venture that are not lighted up by things like exercise, but you can run that one in reverse. Exercise lights up parts of your brain too. But I realize now, and strangely, and I know you're probably a little tired of this, but I realize this as a runner, that now that I'm in my 60s, there aren't a lot of role models for me doing anything new or creative, whether it's creating things or whether it's venturing out to run. And I've been spending a lot of time finding my people, and that's not easy. There aren't a lot of us. Now, also, I know that there is this cultural stereotype of little old ladies knitting as if they spring out of nowhere, as if they never knitted till they were older, or they never crocheted till they were older. And I think that partly comes from the fact that we have more time in the traditional culture. We believe that, at least. We believe that women have more time as they age because the kids are grown up and they're out of the house, and then you're looking at retirement, whatever. But that time is there if you're lucky. I haven't reached it yet. I don't know about the rest of you. And all I can say is I do have somewhat more time since my kid is now 18, but I also have a full-time job. And I also have animals and whatnot. But there's a fantasy that I'm going to get more time someday. And that's a whole subject unto itself, that as you age, you have to figure that out. That as you look at retirement, you have to figure out what comes next in a way that constructively uses your time. The worst outcomes we see in that league are the people who retire and they haven't made any plan for those years. They just have this fantasy of rest. But I'm not going to go there. What I'm going to say is you have to keep finding ways to activate your mind. You don't just reach 60, and I presume 70, although I'm not there yet, and simply default to old lady in some sense, whatever that even means. Like suddenly you have grandchildren to play with if you're lucky, and you have unlimited time and money to travel. Yeah, that isn't going to happen to most of us. But you can keep yourself going in other ways. And the point is, my generation may be the first generation to have so many people who are actually making this age in pretty good shape with enough wealth. I don't mean really wealthy, but I mean sufficient income to be able to look at what do I do with the rest of my life while still understanding that we're not going to retire rich. And so I think I'm in kind of a unique place. And I realized this through my running, that suddenly there are people out there in their 60s running. It's not that unusual anymore. And there are people out there in the 80s and 90s who are setting new records in athletics. And I have to say, I think that's just because that's now possible through this kind of confluence of cultural things, such as lifelong athletes are now accepted as a thing. Women can run in public without wearing long skirts and high heels, etc. There's a lot of reasons at this time in this place people like me exist. And what I discover is younger people seem to think there's this default age where you turn off, where you just don't do anything new or interesting. You might travel, but it's just in tour groups. You don't do anything exciting like rock climbing, whatever. Well, there isn't. There isn't a moment where you shut down unless you decide to. And I also have to be keenly aware as I say this, not everybody is reaching these moments in their life the way I am. There are people who have congenital illnesses who can't do certain things. Arthritis may inhibit things like knitting and crocheting. Various damages may inhibit things like running or even walking. So I want to say this carefully, but I do think, while showing respect to people who have taken hit points of damage, as it were, that you don't ever just shut off. As long as you're breathing, you're going to need to stimulate your mind and you're going to want to do new things. And I think that's been probably the biggest lesson of my 60s, is that my creative side is still alive and well and wants to be expressed. And yeah, I still do a lot better when I get out in nature. So I think the strategy today is simply don't think you're ever going to stop creating. Don't think it's worthwhile not to develop new interests or new hobbies. And I don't care what they are. I think the more they demand your intellectual involvement, the better. And so that does bring you into things like learning new skills in the fiber arts, but also things like learning to run if you can, if you never have, or learning to use a gym or whatever. I think we're living in this post-capitalist culture here in America where we're always emphasizing how you have to work hard for your job. And at the same time, the jobs aren't necessarily fair in their hiring and firing. They're demanding too much. It's really very crazy. And I think we hear about that all the time. And okay, that has its merits, but we're not hearing about our creative selves. And we really do need to have those people inside us, our creative selves. We need to keep ourselves interested in the world, and we need to keep ourselves stimulated mentally. And I think creativity is absolutely the best outlet for this. So please keep trying the new, keep looking for things that interest you. And yes, I take a lot of jokes about switching around between interests. And you know what? I don't care. I do better that way. When I crochet for a while, then I knit for a while, then I get excited about weaving again, whatever. Having said that, let's go on to Aw Shoot, where things start getting exciting. First of all, this week I developed the thing that I call shamming, because I need a name for it. And shamming is when you're going to do a race, you go out, you take a map of the course with you if you can get it, and you run the course in advance. There's nothing sham, there's nothing phony about that. But I'll tell you what came into my head this week. When I went to Tehachapi last week, and I was all set up to run that 5K. And so I went out on Friday morning, the day before the 5K, and I ran the course. And of course, at this point, I picked up my race packet, which included a very nice commemorative t-shirt. And I always race for the shirts. It's just a thing. So I had the shirt. I had my bib number. I didn't have a medal, and I don't care, because I don't care about the medals anymore. I've got plenty of those all over the place here in my studio. But I really wanted the shirt. And so I went out and I ran the course, as you know. And then the next day, as you know, I got sick. And so I was driving home. And I was thinking, usually I celebrate races with a high-protein meal like sashimi. And I thought, well, I didn't run the race because I was sick. And then I thought, that's ridiculous. I did run it. I went out, I did the course, I have the shirt, I ran the race. So I rewarded myself with sashimi up in Lancaster, and it was very nice. And I didn't think much of it, but I did think, I ran the race. I felt very much like I did the race. I'm not competing with anybody, and they didn't have awards in age categories, and I'm certainly not going to win it in terms of raw speed. So I did the race like everybody else. I just did it a day in advance. In the running world, we call that a virtual, where you sign up, you pay all the fees, you get all the stuff, all the bling, and then you run it on your own time. And there are a lot of virtual races out there. And people do virtuals intentionally, not like I did here, because they often will do it to fundraise for an event. Like there's a very famous virtual called Save the Manatees, where the profits go to the manatee rescue and preservation in Florida, that sort of thing. Okay, so I didn't think much of it, except this week I was looking at races. Because once I get the racing bug, I get the racing bug. So I was looking at races, and I saw this one I've always wanted to run. It's called the Space Rock Trail Race. It's been going on for like 14 years with breaks for COVID and all that. So we're on their 10th one. Space Rock takes place in Vasquez Rocks Park here in Southern California. You don't know this, but you've seen it. You've seen this place dozens of times, mostly in westerns and in science fiction, space operas. It's often used to be alien planets. The most famous time you've seen it is Captain Kirk fighting the Gorn back in the classic Star Trek series. Now, if you remember it, that's quite a rocky area. And of course, Kirk and the Gorn stay down in the parking lot, basically, in the flatter areas. But it's a series of crevasses and canyons and large rocks that were thrown up, obviously, during some movement of plates of the Earth, because it is right by the San Andreas Fault. And if you go in the show notes, you'll see pictures of it. So I'm looking at the race description this week, and they kind of got honest. Usually they say, oh, yeah, it's up and down, etc. But this time they literally say the half marathon is one of the hardest half marathons in the U.S., which, having run the course, believe it or not, when I was much younger, I know it and I believe it. There is a lot of single track course. It's one person wide. You can't pass. A lot of steep descent and ascent. So there's a 5K course that loops around the park using a trail that's already there called the Ap Winga. And if you go to the show notes, you're going to see 3 maps. One is, the first one, is my phone tracking the course I ran. And if you blow up the second map, you will see that my course and the Ap Winga trail course are pretty much the same. And then if you go down to the Space Rock official map, you will see, pretty much the same. So what did I do? I went out Saturday morning because I was concerned. I've always wanted to run this. I'm sure the t-shirt is very cool. I'm also sure that in trail running circles it's cachet, that it's very chic. And I thought, okay, but I don't want to run a course like this in a crowd for the simple reason that if they're steep up and down, I don't have depth perception. So I'm going to have a really hard time. If I'm on a single track and people are piling up behind me, that's going to really embarrass and stress me. And also, I'm just not going to be able to see. As I descend, I'm going to slip and fall, and I don't like doing that. So I thought, well, I'll go out and I'll run it this past Saturday morning, and I'll run it early, which thank goodness I did. I got onto it about 8 a.m., and it was about 65 degrees when I got off. An hour and a half later, it was about 75. And at that point, I was doing fine. I had water with me and everything else. So I went out and I did the course. And here's what happened. I said, there's no way in heck I'm going to race this. But I did the course, and since I'm not going to pay $75 basically for a shirt and then nothing else I'm going to use, I rewarded myself. I went to my favorite t-shirt site, which right now is T-Turtle, and they have all these sales on. And I bought a space-themed shirt for like $12. It's a black cat sitting in the middle of a star field. Minerva gets the last word yet again, as you can tell. And that will be my Space Rock commemorative shirt that I have run the course. So, of course, I thought, well, this is nice. And I've learned something now from this and from Tehachapi, that I can go out and run courses and be perfectly okay with not running them competitively in the race and still collecting bling, or awarding myself bling in this case. And I can say now I've had the experience without the stress of being in a crowd of racers, because in a race like this, there's no way I want to do it. I do want to point out that the Space Rock race, and you can get a link for it in the show notes, does encourage walkers and hikers. They know there's going to be a lot of people out there for a while. I also want to point out it's in early October, so it should be relatively cool out there, but yeah, there's no shade on that trail. And yeah, there's a lot of steep descent and ascent, the whole thing. There was very little flat and fast. It was only at the very beginning when you're on the Pacific Crest Trail for about, a third of a mile. After that, it is all up and down. It is not something I would do competitively. There's a 10K. It's 2 loops of the same course. My question there, why? If I did that as a 10K, I'd be out there for 4 hours. That's just too much. In that time, if I want the exercise, I can just do a flat, fast half marathon, which I'm not trained up to, but, that's what I was thinking. By October 5th, I don't expect to be trained up to a 10K, certainly not this demanding a 10K. So anyway, I've realized I'm doing these as virtuals, but I am doing them to check out should I race them. And so I have named this process shamming, where you go out, you run the course, and you make decisions about the race. So I was shamming, and you can see some glorious pictures of where I was shamming. And I would tell you, when you look at that second picture and the third picture and you're looking down, the reason you're looking down is I'm at the highest point in the course, and you're looking down to where I started at the lower point. And you should be impressed. Meanwhile, I'm not shamming my upcoming races, and so I did go out on Sunday after really exerting myself on Saturday. When I shammed the Space Rock course, I burned 900 calories according to my phone's estimate, and I knew it. When I came back, I chowed down on straight up mozzarella cheese because I was trying to get the salt and the water and the protein. I mean, the craving was real. But I decided to go out on Sunday and run the course for the Be the Light, which is a 5K happening on September 21st in the evening. And the interesting thing there was it's a course, it's considered flat and fast, very, very gradual descent and ascent, except at one very short point where you run up a ramp to get onto a bridge over the river gorge. You're running a loop around the Santa Clara riverbed. You start in a park in Valencia and you run down the west side of the loop, and it's gradual downhill, which was nice. And then you go up the steep ramp, you're running on concrete, you run down a not so steep ramp, and you're back on asphalt on the other side of the river gorge, and there is no dirt trail next to it. On the west side there is, on the east side there is not. This gets important because like an idiot, I started running at something like 10:45, and as you can imagine, at this time of year in Southern California, out in the direct sun, it got hot. So hot that at 1.8 miles, I realized my feet were burning, that my shoes were literally that hot running on the asphalt. There was also nowhere to go because there was no side trail. I had to just stay on the asphalt till I finished that stretch and reached the north end of the trail where there was a bridge across the gorge again, across a regular road, and then go down the west side to reach the park and finish. So, yeah, for the first time in 53 years of running, I literally scorched the bottoms of my feet on a run, right through running socks, right through very heavily padded running shoes. So if you think that doesn't happen. And I thought about it, and I thought, should I run this? But then realized, again, this is going to be run a month from now. It's about 25 days out, according to my Race Countdown app. And it's going to be in the evening, and this should all have cooled down. So hopefully that was not shamming. But I am proud of myself for coining the term shamming, which is running a course in advance to make decisions about the race, which means this was shamming. But it was really great. The other thing is, I believe this is the same course I'll be using on the Monster Dash in October. And in the Santa Clarita 10K, I also think it might be part of that course. So this is pretty nice because I'm getting a sense of the courses I'm running. The Sugar Daddy next June, I believe, is also on this course. So that was a pretty worthwhile sham. In fact, I may go out when the weather cools and run that course a few times. It's a good way to get in a 5K. It was about 3.5. No, by the way, when I was shamming the Be the Light, I did not run my full run. When I was out there, I was supposed to be running a series of 5-minute interval, 10 of them, with 1 minute walking in between. I was supposed to do that 10 times. I only got to 8 by the time I got back to the park, which was nice. But I was so heat exhausted, I was shivering, which means you stop. You don't keep going. And so I got back to my car and sat in the cool car, drinking a lot of water, and brought myself back to normal. And you can see in the show notes a picture of the massive protein intake I did afterwards. I went down to a place called Mr. Sushi and ordered a big sashimi plate. It was really a little too much, but I was craving the protein. On to the fluffy books. Nothing too new there. I'm still listening to the end of India Holton's latest book, The Ornithologist's Field Guide to Love, because I didn't want to listen to it at night when I'm falling asleep because it was where all the action happens. But I am reading The Perils of Lady Catherine de Bourgh. This is yet another mystery novel that's a spin-off of the classic Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. The detectives in this are the children of the Darcys and the Tilneys. The Darcys from Pride and Prejudice, the Tilneys from Northanger Abbey. It's very charming. They're a lot of fun. They move kind of slowly. A lot of internal process. because one of the characters is pretty clearly meant to be neurodivergent. And it's very interesting watching that character be developed. And it's interesting to have the author talking about the internal process of that character. So there's a link in the show notes, and I'm having a lot of fun with that. Something I really like, well, this is going to come as a bit of a shock, but I put in a link for Bear Spray for Runners. This is a little vial of sprayable, I think it's hot pepper, capsicum, and it is attached to a strap you can wrap around your fingers. You can customize the fit by adjusting the Velcro. Has a safety lid on it. So when you put this on your hand properly, no matter which hand you put it on, essentially you rotate the vial so that the spray is facing to what would be the front of you. And it's got a safety lid. So if you press your finger on the top, you're not going to shoot anybody. What you do is you flick that to the side and then press down while spraying across their eye area. Hey Gemma, why? Well, I've been toying with this idea. My husband gave me one years ago, and I never even carried it because I used to run with an armed and loaded German Shepherd. And this week I had a good lesson in why I shouldn't do that anymore, because I got chased by a pit bull. I was nowhere near its property. The owner went in her front gate. She unlocked the gate, drove her car through it. She drove her car by me. It didn't bother me in any way. It was very normal. But when she unlocked her gate, her full-grown pit bull got out, about 60 pounds of solid muscle. I was quite a distance away, 200 yards, and I was heading away from their property. This didn't stop the dog from going for me. However, I got to be careful how I say that. It circled me twice, barking and slavering. And I made the decision not to stop. Normally, I would, but I made the decision as I was running that since the dog did not simply jump me, as it could have from the back, I had no defense against that. The dog was more in warning mode, and the best thing I could do was get away from its property so that it wouldn't feel it had to defend its territory. I had already triggered its prey drive simply by moving, even though I was moving nowhere near its property. So the prey drive was triggered. The only question is what's going to happen to make it attack me. And it really didn't. It wanted to threaten me. It ran around me twice and ran back. The owner never called it at any time. I did not hear the owner calling the dog. The dog simply figured that it had gotten far enough from its territory and it let me move on. I figured moving on was the best idea because I didn't get attacked right away. My thought was the dog is trying to warn me off, so I should respect that and move off. However, the dog was within about 6 feet of me, and that's where I realized if I'd had a German Shepherd with me, the dog would have attacked it. That would have been a loss for me. I've had 2 dogs with me on runs and hikes that were killed in front of me by pit bulls. And please don't tell me it's the owner. This was the owner. I mean, if she knew who this dog was, she should not be letting him loose out her gate with no attempt at recall. This was definitely the owner. However, because I use working dogs, I'm going to say this. I use working dogs because I respect what they are bred to do. And they have those instincts, more or less. So I use herding dogs, and most of them, their forebears never herded. Okay, but the instinct is still so strong in them, literally 100 years after the time they were most likely as a breed to be used commonly for herding. By this, I mean I'm talking about my German Shepherds and my Collies. But the instinct is strong. This is still true in pit bulls, which were used to attack other animals, and I'm not going to go into that. So, people want you to say, well, it's the owner, not the dog. It's both. That there are dogs who perfectly solidly carry what they were bred to do, even several hundred years later. And believe me, I know what I'm talking about because Queenie is incredibly good at herding. She is the single best herding dog I've probably ever earned. She is so driven to do it. And I know her forebears for 4 generations back, and none of them had herding awards or titles. It's just in her. And so when you own a dog, you have to think about this. When you get a dog, you have to think about who the dog is and what it was bred to do, and does it have that instinct? So no, I'm not going to go into this extremism. They should be put down, blah, blah, blah. But I do think as an owner, you have to be aware. If you get one of these breeds and they've got that instinct, you're going to be living with the outcome. Having said that, if I'd had bear spray, I would have sprayed the dog, and I will the next time. I will carry it when I run up there. Why am I just not avoiding the area? Because it's a really good place to run. This is the second time this dog has done this to me. First time was much less aggressive. But again, I wasn't hurt in any way. I wasn't even scared. I just said, easy there, boy, and talked calmly to it and just kept going forward, figuring that is what the dog wanted. It wanted me away from its property. I was nowhere near its property. And the reality is I also got chased, about 2 weeks ago by some dogs loose that did not belong to anybody, collarless. They were just turned loose by owners who want to get rid of them up in another part of my course. This can't be avoided. So I got bear spray. It doesn't hurt them. I know it's the same stuff we were using in the prison. I've been sprayed, and it doesn't hurt them, but it's unpleasant, and it's enough to turn them off, to make them just stay away from you. And this particular spray also marks them with paint. It's like a black light sort of thing, so that if you do call for help, they can be spotted as the one who went after you. This is really for attacks by humans, and I'm fine with that. And no, I don't want to hurt this dog in any way. I do respect the dog trying to do its job, but I was nowhere near its property. This was just ridiculous. Its prey drive was triggered, and its owner was irresponsible. Okay, having said that, something I really like, bear spray. And it's bear spray you can carry as a runner. They also make clip-ons for bikers, in case you need it. Look, if you're a woman and you're running alone, or even if you're not, I've had people come on to me in races, you might need this. And you have to be real that this is the risk out there. You don't deserve it, but it's the risk out there. Okay, so now you all think I'm a suicidal maniac. I'm getting chased by dogs. I'm racing in canyons in the heat. No, I'm fine, really. And there's still one more. So you can see, and put a lid on it, I didn't do anything new, but you can see me looking completely horrifying after losing 900 calories in one morning, chowing down on mozzarella as fast as I could. It just struck me as funny, so I took a selfie. And you can see my vast protein feast after I did the Sunday morning sham of the Be the Light course. In the blather, well, I've already told you about running the Be the Light course. I am also going to say that I had another experience this week. I was driving, and all of a sudden all these cars came from different roads, and they were covered in American flags and bunting, and they had offensive bumper stickers with a lot of four-letter language, because apparently those things go together now in America. And they decided they were going to have a parade. They didn't have any permit that anybody knew of. And if you were in a car and you happened to be on those roads and you happened to have to be in their lane to make a right turn, they harassed you. So I had a guy behind me who laid on his horn the whole time trying to make me get out of their lane, which it wasn't. No parade markers, nothing. And I had to make a right turn. But I guess they thought they could do that. We got to a light and I saw them driving other cars off the road. And they made a good go at trying to do that to me, and I just refused. There were too many witnesses. I could video them, and I just stayed in my lane until I made the right turn. And they were driving through quiet suburban neighborhoods, beeping and honking and carrying on. In my head, this is associated with the completely horrifying attack on vice presidential candidate Tim Walz's son, Gus. Those of you who are in America will remember that at the Democratic National Convention, Gus was so proud of his father that he burst into tears. To me, this is proof that men are still wonderful and tender at heart, and it was a beautiful moment, and everybody was deeply moved by it. And so one of those same people who like to cover themselves in American flags and harass people got onto social media and aggressed the kid, and then wrote this half-witted apology where they intentionally misspelled. They know better. They're in the media. And it was obviously just a phony apology. And this is what that group is now associated with. And so one of the things I learned this week is this is exactly what is wrong with America right now. That people are using patriotism to cover aggressive action, to cover belittling young people, to cover attacking appropriate male behaviors like expressing pride and expressing honest emotion in public, that this is the worst of America. This is not the country I signed up for. And frankly, I have now been totally reinforced in my political stance by the events of this week. I am simply disgusted that people would attack Gus Walz. And I'm also disgusted that people keep saying, oh, he only did it because he's neurodivergent in some way. He did it because his father has achieved nomination by the will of the people of a massive country for the second most powerful position, arguably, in this country. If that was my father, I would have wept with pride as well. Of course, nobody is pointing out his sister, the social worker, was also weeping that they were proud of their father. And we're belittling that kind of family love in the American press, while that same party claims to be the party that's protecting the family, which we all know is a cover-up. This is the worst of what America can be, and that really disgusted me all the way around. Having said that, let's move on to the community resources. And you know these. These are the links I preserve over on the Ravelry group of links that have been useful to the group, including books and patterns, things you can buy that support your knitting, and links to skills and techniques. There's also a link to my own link tree. I finally made a link tree, and I think it's kind of useful. I don't have a lot of places to put it. In the calendar, you can see the usual suspects, the groups that meet in the Santa Clarita Valley. They are all on Facebook. That's how you can look them up. But these are our local crafting groups. On my calendar, hallelujah, as I record this, it is Tuesday, August 27th, because I've had to re-record this a few times. And so a week from now, I will be on a 10-day vacation. Hallelujah, praise heaven, I really need it. It's been a little too exciting around here, as you can tell. In the meantime, I will have off through September 9th. Then I have the Be the Light race coming up on September 21st. Of course, CFR 10 at the Courtyard by Marriott in Valencia on September 28th. And the Monster Dash on October 26th, and the Santa Clarita 10K associated with their marathon on November 10th. Links to all of these are in the show notes if you want to come out and join me. And then from November 28th through December 1st, Thanksgiving, hooray, and Romuel in December. Minerva gets the last word. She's on strike because yesterday was National Dog Day, so I had to use her stand-in, the wooble I made of her. But since she's on strike, the dogs volunteered to be the poster children for National Dog Day yesterday. So there is my sticker with the two dogs saying, "We love you." There's Captain on the left and Queenie looking joyfully into the camera as they do. All of them, Minerva, Captain, and Queenie, want you to know that at home we are a community. We work together as a team to achieve our goals. And when we do that, life on the farm works well, and that's a nice way to think of life in your community. When we support the community, every individual benefits. Having said that, everybody remember, stay safe, take care of each other, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye. So we have come to the end of another episode of Cognitive. Please do not use this podcast to diagnose yourself. If you think you are having a mental health problem, please contact a licensed mental health professional. Show notes for these episodes can be found at cognitivepodcast, all one word, .blogspot.com. Episodes can be found at iTunes under the name Cognitive Podcast, but also can be found posted next to the show notes on the Blogspot page. Thank you so much for listening. Everybody, stay safe, take care of each other, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.